Welcome to heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. As always, I am Mike Chisholm. As always, I am so excited to be here and talk about the world of mental wellness when it comes to men. I get the easiest job in the world. My wife has the hardest job in the world. She's building this unbelievable men's mental wellness platform called He Changed It. Things are going very, very well. We've got some unbelievable announcements coming up in the next few weeks. If you haven't downloaded it, what the heck are you waiting for? Head to your app store in the Android and the iOS store. Look for He Changed It. Find the He app. Grab it. If you haven't subscribe to the podcast, again, what the heck are you waiting for? Please subscribe. Please share. The He Changed It overlords are always saying that to me. Hey, we need our metrics. We need to know. We need people subscribing and sharing. So if you haven't done that, please do so. I love hosting this podcast. As you, if you've listened to any of the episodes that we have put out there, you know that it's so much fun to do this. It's a day off for me because I get to have conversations, be the front seat, talking with amazing people about amazing things in the world that pertaining to framed around wellness and what that means. If you've listened to this podcast or watched us on the YouTubes, you know that I love leadership. I love talking to people who exhibit strong leadership, compassionate leadership. But at the end of the day, it is a skill set that I strive for and that I appreciate. The gentleman that we have here, actually, if you listened a couple of weeks ago, we had his son on. Andre Blanleil was on a couple of weeks ago, and I spent the first 4 or 5 minutes of the podcast gushing about his dad. Well, guess what? His dad has actually decided to come and join us today. Andre Blanleil is a very successful entrepreneur in the city that I was born and raised in. Not only is he a successful entrepreneur, but he decided at some point that it was his responsibility as a citizen to stand up and also help lead. And he did that, just that. Civic politics, many times people say that the civic politicians are the ones who actually can really affect change for people. Andre was on our city government for decades. I am so grateful that he has taken time out of his very, very busy schedule, because he is still a very successful entrepreneur, to come here and talk. We've got a specific issue we're going to talk about, but we'll get to that in a minute. Andre Blanleil, thank you for taking time out of your day to come here and talk with us here on heCast.
Well, thank you for having me. Like I said, I listened to Kyle's podcast. It was very well done. And when you asked me if I'd be interested, I said, sure. I mean, it's always interesting to talk about different perspectives on things. And I'm always open for that.
Yeah. And I appreciate that about you. In fact, your response to me was anytime. Yeah, let's do this. You were excited to come on here. And I do appreciate that. Do you remember when I'm 45 now, when I was 21 years old, I ran for city council, and I was just this pie-eyed kid who just basically thought, you know what, I want to roll my hands up and I want to help lead. I want to help, there's nobody in our 20s giving that perspective on council. And there were a couple of people, yourself and a guy by the name of Robert Hobson, who took me aside and really, really encouraged me in life, not just in that one little election, but in life. I don't know if you remember that.
I'm sorry, I don't, but I do. I mean, I've done that with a lot of people. I encourage anybody that's interested in municipal politics to get involved. I mean, it's like you said, it's the ground floor of everything. So anybody that ever approached me over the years and said they're interested, I've always said, let's meet and, get involved, because that's what we need in our community.
I want to go back. Now, you started a business that in the 80s and the 90s was such a hot topic, if you want to use that terminology. You were in the audio video business. And I remember how many stereo shops there used to be back in the day. Stereo, home car audio. That was the big deal. My first Lamborghini that I ever saw was because of you. You brought in the Alpine Lamborghini.
Lamborghini was a huge popular thing that we brought in. Yeah.
Yeah. Back in the day when there were all these stereo shops, did you want to get into stereo because you liked hi-fi, or were you like, no, I'm a businessman. This is a good business to get into. And that's how it's going to
No, I kind of grew up in the fact that my dad was a TV technician. He fixed this stuff. So growing up, we always had a color TV before color TVs were. So, I mean, he was that kind of, he wasn't much of a people guy, but he was a really, really bright guy when it came to electronic repair stuff. And, I was living in Calgary. I started out as a, part-time job as on a shoe store. I mean, and basically became full-time. And then right out of high school, then I went into assistant manager, did that, moved to Calgary. And my dad had a little TV repair shop, and he had a couple TVs in the wall, and we're big fastball players, so we're big sports guys. So I was playing ball in Calgary, and we decided, well, let's come home and play in our local city again. And so I kind of bought half the company at that point, and we opened kind of our first electronics store, and it was 1980, which, I mean, scary now when you look back at that long ago. And yeah, we were kind of a one of. I mean, then we all of a sudden, we basically ended up having a thing where, there was, Future Shop came to town, and then A&Ps came to town. And, so we just kind of fought through some really tough years. Talking about mental toughness, those were some tough years. I mean, we didn't have the cash or the assets that obviously those big companies did. But we just persevered. I mean, we're not very good at quitting. And one of my kind of lines at work is if you're not going forward, you're actually going backwards. So standing still is not an option.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of always been my formula is like, if we can't bear down and make this thing grow and get better and always improve what we're doing, then we're actually going backwards. In other words, people will pass us, and and that's a big part of retaining your staff as well, and that's a huge part of what we have to work towards.
You said a whole bunch of things there. The one that I'm really zeroing in on is okay. So there are these corporate giants around you that are kind of smashing each other in the world of electronics, and then there's all these little guys around. Well, as the 90s kind of turned into the 2000s, those little guys started disappearing. And I look at where you're at, and Andre's Electronics isn't not only disappearing, you guys are expanding. You guys have grown in an industry that many of the self-employed or the personally owned businesses have gone down. What is there a secret out there for business owners who need to diversify, need to make sure that they're able to adapt with the times? Clearly, you're able to do that.
Well, I think, that is an important factor, is to learn where to adapt and where to move your business to. I mean, in the situation of our business, we were small, we were TV, car audio, and then we had a TELUS, which was at the time was BC Cellular way back then for people that remember those days.
So you made the move from just primarily electronics and then into mobile phones, and that was a big
thing, and that really big thing. And the other thing that I realized is it wasn't, it was probably 10 or 15 years into it. I realized that we're probably not going to survive being a small mom and pop shop. And in fact, almost there's none around. And so part of my strategy became that I should buy some of these. Most of them didn't have exit strategies. They didn't have, anywhere to go with it. So I basically, bought a bunch of mom and pops, Castlegar, Cranbrook, Williams Lake. I mean, went through those and basically, what you're buying when you're buying these stores is a couple of things. You're buying their community relationship, which is super important, but you're also buying great people. Yeah. And to me, that was really an important thing, is that, looking at buying the people that are involved. Just buying a store and opening a store is real tough.
Yeah.
If you can buy somebody out where they've got, community employees that are really strong and things like that, that's the key to our success. And, I saw that and I realized that over time we weren't going to survive with one or two or three stores, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And right now it's even more dramatic when there's inventory shortages. These small guys aren't really getting much product. So, but you got to get to a certain scale, and that's kind of what we did. And really, we did grow with TELUS, with TELUS products, and kind of my strategy was buying out the small TELUS guy in Cranbrook or Castlegar, and then expanding the electronic side. But I think the other key is not just limiting what you sell.
Yeah.
To me, we've got a customer base. So, 3 years ago, we didn't sell barbecues. We didn't sell Traegers. Yep. We didn't sell appliances up until 5 years ago.
Yep.
We didn't sell, vacuums. So again, it's finding what niche.
Yeah, you've been in and out of appliances over the years, right?
No, we did microwaves years ago, but we really got into appliances about 5 years ago.
Right.
But the last 2 or 3 years have been over the top growth in appliances and then barbecues and outdoor living. And so, I guess I look at it as you got to find what fits into your business. Yep. And once you build your clientele base, find other products that they want to buy and try to grow into that. I don't want to narrow up who knows what we'll sell next. Depends what the next cool thing that comes up.
That's really cool. Okay, so for people who want to see, this is an old school. I was that kid in the late 80s, early 90s. I was that kid that would go on a weekend when I'm not in school. I would go to 4 or 5 different stereo shops just to see all the new, the new Sony Megabass headphones and things like that. And that was a culture point, I think, back then is that kind of stuff. You're an old school electronics store that is clearly diversified, whatnot. If people want to find you, how do they find you? What's the best way to find Andre's Electronics?
Facebook, website.
Andre'sElectronics.com?
.com, yeah.
Andre'sElectronics.com. Okay.
And the funny thing is, though, is that I was never that guy.
I was never that guy.
I was never that guy that, looks for the coolest stereo or I've been a business enthusiast, and to me, you know, don't get me wrong. I love my big TVs. I love my audio systems, but I'm not that guy that goes, you know, I love that next cool, you know, funky
you
thing.
saw there were guys like me.
Absolutely.
You saw that there were guys like me that when you did have the Alpine Lamborghini show up and pull off the trailer, that we were going to be the first in line to come and see it. You can block it. No, don't worry about it. We're not even going to cut it out. We're organic.
And that's my phone. It always rings. So
I know.
I got to get it off. I forgot to take it off ring.
And when I thank you for being so generous with your time, I'm not fucking kidding. Like, this guy is a really, really busy guy in our community. And you taking time here, the gratefulness that I have, it's pouring out of me.
Now off. Thank you.
You saw guys like me and you said, okay, there's a market there. There are people who are real enthusiasts of this stuff. And that's really, and that's the business side of things rather than just being passionate about something. And so therefore, because I'm passionate about it, I got to get into business with it. Those are two very different lines of thinking.
Well, it's funny because, I mean, we were at one time one of the biggest Panasonic microwave dealers in Western Canada. We had cooking classes on Tuesday nights. We did. So, I mean, this is back in the day of that. Then we got into, DVD players and, laser disc players.
Oh yeah.
Where we actually rented video for a while because you couldn't get a laser disc in those days. So, I mean, again, the ability to continually move your direction of your company, I think is so important. I mean, I think that's our advantage. We're small enough. We could turn on a dime and do something. We could pivot.
Yeah.
The big companies don't have that ability. I mean, you see the Sears of the world and those kind of companies, they don't pivot real quick. We can go, okay, we're going to do that. And we're also going to go after it.
Yeah. We could do an entire podcast on this. We're not going to. At what point did you say, okay, you know what? Business is good. But that civic leadership thing started calling. How long were you a city councilor?
I was a city councilor for 21 years.
21 years.
Long time.
And I know many people, you had a lot of people, big business people who said, no, we want you to progress. We want you to move forward in this. And I mean, who knows if that ever does happen for you. But at the end of the day, you felt the need to contribute back and to help lead on a civic level. When did those seeds start to grow?
Well, it's funny. It started with, some expansion of Springfield Road and things like that. And then I realized that, this is my community. My mom came here. She was born and raised here. My dad came in 1945. I wanted to see, and we also got a really bit of back in early kind of 80s. Actually, I got involved in 90s. Yeah. But there became that real negative stop growth, keep Kelowna small. And it's funny because a lot of that came from people that moved from Vancouver or somewhere else and went, oh, we want to move this little community. We want to see it stay little.
Right.
And I guess I looked at it and I go, I want to make sure this community is a better place for my kids than it was when I grew up. And don't get me wrong, it was a great place to grow up. But now we got university, we got a waterfront that's amazing. We've got lots of jobs. I mean, back in 80, I went to Calgary because there was no work here.
There's no work.
So the reality,
Western Star, the mill, that was basically it.
Well, Western Star shut down.
And
so I mean, one of those things that I wanted to make sure that Kelowna became a vibrant community. I mean, and that was a big passion for me. It was making sure that Kelowna was going to grow and become this amazing city that's become now.
It's funny, in the year that we ran in that election that I was telling you about, one of the big issues was how far does the city bend to keep, at that time, I think they were either the biggest or the second biggest employer, which was a semi-truck manufacturer called Western Star. They're now owned by Chrysler, I believe. But one of the big issues of that election was how far do we bend to keep these guys happy? This one company, and what you just said, hindsight, having the benefit of hindsight being 2020, that's exactly right. I mean, if we would have had such short-sighted vision that, oh no, we got to keep this one employer really, really, really happy, that's not going to get us very far. What you were just talking about is like, no, we need to grow responsibly outside of things like that and allow this evolution to occur.
Well, and we need diversity. That's the biggest thing. We're not a one mill town, and unfortunately, there's a lot of them. I got a lot of stores in these 1 or 2 or 3 mill towns that are being affected by this stuff. But Kelowna is a unique position. I mean, it's the central of the interior. I think it's the most beautiful city in the world. So I think it's has the ability to draw people.
Yeah.
And when you can draw people, you could draw. But one of the biggest things that we pushed for when I was on city council is entrepreneurship, making sure we made the community open for business.
Yeah.
Because I think if you narrow it down and try to limit growth and limit what we're doing, and you limit the type of people, I always get in conversation with people. I was going to say argument, but conversation with people when we talk about how growth is bad. I go, forget about the buildings. It's all the people that move into those buildings,
Right.
that bring their background, they bring their expertise, they bring everything from different communities. That's super important to me.
Yes.
And then sometimes we get carried away with, we got a new high rise going in. But think about all the cool people that are moving into that high rise. They come from different communities that now bring their specialty and their expertise and make Kelowna just a better place.
Well, I mean, if you want to use a business phrase that's been used forever, teamwork makes the dream work. I mean, if we got a better team and we got more skill set on that team, guess what? We're going to have a better dream. We're going to have a better outcome from that.
Well, and I think with what's gone on with the unfortunate thing of the pandemic, I think it's also made people realize that they don't want to live in a really tiny, in a big Vancouver city, possibly, or Toronto or whatever.
Yeah.
And they can work from anywhere. And I think that's made a big difference. I mean, one of the reasons, we kept saying someday people are going to find Kelowna, and they have now.
Yep.
And I think, as much as, you get traffic and you get all these other things that come with it, you do get those cool people that are coming to town and investing and doing things and bringing jobs and bringing people and all the things. And more importantly, their expertise in the community.
Yeah.
And that's invaluable.
I said that there was one topic that I wanted to specifically talk about because it doesn't just affect Kelowna. It's affecting all sorts of communities all over North America right now. And I'm going to get into that, but I want to set the table a little bit before we do that. As a leader, as a civic leader, you've come across, and I think even in this conversation so far, you come across strong. You're a strong personality. You're a strong leader. You've always been known for that. I would even throw out the idea that sometimes you can be a human starting gun, where you could say something and then a whole bunch of stuff can happen from that. There's people that can be divided. People can, it can be a little bit polarizing. You're a strong leader.
Well,
right?
and I think, and I think people don't understand that I'm actually also very soft and compassionate in a lot of ways. And I think, unfortunately, when the media covers you, it covers you simply in one way. Yeah, I'm a business person. Yeah, I want to see things happen. But I also believe that you got to fight for things. And anytime you fight for something, I mean, to me, the politician that does nothing, that never gets himself in trouble or herself in trouble, is not doing anything. To me, you've got to push the boundaries of and fight for things. And when you fight for things, you hope you're the people that you're fighting for, which is hopefully the bulk of the population will like it. But there's always going to be somebody that doesn't like what you're saying.
100%.
And to me, I've always been willing to take that personal bashing a bit and fight for things. Because to me, without, whether it was the arena downtown where I got yelled at by 300 people saying downtown is the wrong place to put an arena. Yeah. I think we can remind all those people now that it's been incredibly successful and it's exactly where it's going. But you got to be able to go in front of it. I'll never forget it was my first term or second term anyway. I went in front of a Glenmore Resident Association meeting and they were screaming at myself and one of the city staff members about how downtown Kelowna is the wrong place to put an arena. Yeah. It should be out by the airport. Yeah. And man, we got yelled at. And so, I mean, you build tough skin, but it's also, people think it's easy to do that. It's not. I mean,
you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to ask that because now what you're talking about, the 90s and the 2000s, okay, that's minor league when you compare it to the polarization that's happening in politics on the certainly on the national and international stage, but it's coming down even into local politics where you've got people who entrench so hard. And when they entrench, they also attack so viciously. They get personal. They do all these things. That was my question, actually. I was going to say that you talk about this thick skin. Number one, is your skin thick enough still to deal with what's going on today? And number two, how did you develop that? How's that mental toughness? Was that something that you inherited from your dad? Or is that something that do you read a lot of books? No,
how do you probably get that? Growing up, my dad was a very black and white guy. We got our butts kicked and there was no gray zone for us. We had a vineyard. We had to go work every weekend. We worked after school. We worked. That was kind of what we got ingrained. So if I give my dad a lot of credit was, we do everything ourselves and we're not afraid to work. Yeah. But I think, it's not as easy to turn a blind eye to some of this stuff when people attack you. And I think the problem is that I love seeing people on Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that, that unfortunately in some of these forums have made people be anonymous and be really mean. Yeah. And I think that is hard to take, especially when it relates down to your family or your friends or, it isn't easy. And I think I see some of the stuff that sometimes Colin goes through or, I think the problem I have sometimes with Facebook and Instagram particularly is they give a forum for people to be they could throw things out there and there's no kind of backlash towards them. Right. And I think the other problem is with Facebook and Instagram is they tend to give you, if you like a certain direction, they give you a lot of information on that direction. The echo chamber. And nothing on the other side. Yep. And I think that's the real danger. And I see that in the US right now. I was just down there last week, and it's awful. They've divided the country into so, and I see that happening in Canada. And I think it's really bad. I mean, if you take a stance on something, you have a bunch of people that are, shooting at you. And I think it limits people's ability. I think two things. It limits people's ability to do what I do, which is maybe go outside the box and say things that not everybody is in the mainstream likes.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, I think it eliminates a lot of people that want to run publicly for things.
100%.
Because they go like, do I really need this?
Yeah.
I mean,
You're looking at one right now, by the way.
No, I mean
100%. You are literally talking about me as you're talking.
Well,
Sorry,
and the reality is everybody has something in their life. They made a bad comment or they did something wrong or whatever. If you're going to throw that in somebody's face, I'm seeing things happen like 10 years ago. People are bringing stuff up. Well, you did this 10 years ago. Do people want to go through that? I mean, that's my biggest, for me, none of us are perfect. We've all made mistakes. We've all said things that we probably shouldn't have said back in the day.
Yes.
But now it gets thrown in your face. And this guy said this 8 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and they destroyed that person.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people go, well, do I even want to put and I think that's showing in the kind of weakness of people we get to run. And not saying the people that aren't running aren't good, but I think it's narrowing a lot of people that are going, do I want to put my family, my life through that microscope and then get tortured on some sort of social media? And I think it is an issue. And even when I wrote that comment about my frustrations of what's going on in downtown Kelowna leading into what's going on,
absolutely,
is I said in my email, my comment, I said, I'm probably going to get some backlash on this because it's not what people are doing or believe is right.
Right.
I think it's right, but it's not always popular.
Yeah, and let's move into that right now a little bit. All over North America, what is seeming to be happening in all sorts of different cities. There's dramatic examples of it, like in cities like San Francisco or Seattle, where California as a state actually, this is a real issue where you've got homeless that seem to be. I want to be very, very careful. I don't want to offend people as I say this stuff here. Like, I mean, God, even as we talk about this stuff, we got to be careful what we say because it comes across wrong. But you've got this homeless issue where there are tent cities that are growing up all over the place. And then you've got a whole bunch of polarization where there doesn't seem to be a ton of compromise working in the middle to try and find the exact right solution, treatment versus punishment, housing versus, even some would say incarceration or what do we do with these people during these times where it's getting harder and harder and harder because of the cost of living to live. It's getting harder to, it's getting easier to be addicted. You look at the pharmaceutical industry with, and their contribution to opioids and all sorts of stuff. It is a big fucking pot of things mixed together that is really difficult to try and strain everything out and separate it all. And our city is not immune to that. That's happening in our city as well. And we look at other examples in other bigger cities of how this could evolve into. And last week, you put up a post where you talked about what was happening in our city specifically. And I immediately, that was when I reached out and I said, hey, let's talk about this long form a little bit because, I believe that the answer to these things is not less words, it's more words. I believe long form is where, and compromise in the middle of people talking about both of whatever it is that they're passionate about or that they're knowledgeable about. And the answer is going to be in the middle somewhere where you find that compromise. What is it right now that is so concerning to you about this issue for our local area?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to define homelessness because I think that's part of the problem. Okay. I think what we've really got, there are obviously some people, I've had some tough times that are truly homeless that need our help. Yes. And I completely think we should help those people. What we really have is a mental illness, addiction, criminal issue. And I think that's the problem we have right now. And I think
it's three different groups there. We've got some criminal, we got some addiction, and we've got some mental health issue. Well, and they're not necessarily the same thing, but they can be either lumped in or they can be the same thing.
Well, I think in a lot of cases they are the same issue.
Okay.
I think that's the problem. If you've been downtown Kelowna and you've been almost any part of Kelowna today, it's getting to the point where I think it's not acceptable. And I understand the police and the RCMP and the politicians have the courts to say, I was told right out by the inspector or our head RCMP member that the courts are saying don't even arrest these people anymore.
Yes.
And I guess the issue I have with that is we're willing to accept that the rest of us have a lifestyle. We're dealing with this, and unfortunately, there's a large criminal element out there. And I guess, and this is where I will go outside the box. I don't think giving free drugs to people is the answer. I don't think, making it not illegal. To me, I don't want to arrest people. I think we should be building facilities for treatment.
Yes.
And when I make the comment about stop building houses, build facilities,
right?
Because to me, we've only got a certain amount of money.
Yep.
And I know the provincial government spent a fortune with the cities. City Kelowna has played a big role in that.
Yep.
And I think they've done a good job. When I just left council, they did a thing where we had about 300 homeless people on the streets, and they've now built over 400 homes for the homeless in Kelowna. The problem is twice as big as it used to be.
Right.
So it's not fixing the problem. I think one of the people I talked to said,
is it enabling the problem?
I think it's enabling it. And I think it's making people come here as well. And I think the other thing I look at is I go, there's 100,000 people on opioids supposedly in British Columbia.
Yes.
We can't build 100,000 homes.
Right.
And I think the other thing is just building them home and leaving them sick and not treated isn't the answer. We wouldn't do that for our animal. Why are we doing that for these people here? And I think, unfortunately, it's going to take a bit of outside the box thinking, and it may or may not be popular, but we may have to go to some sort of institution again. Yeah. Because unfortunately, some of these people, and like I say, go on the streets, the yelling man is out there. He's on Kelowna streets. Everybody knows, has a business downtown, knows who he is.
Yep.
He probably is he needs help, and he may need help for a long period of time. And to me, I think it's not compassionate just to simply give them a home and let them deal with their drug issues and their problems. We need to fix the drug issues. Yeah. And unfortunately, until we get our head around that, which is not what the provincial government is doing, it's not what the feds are doing. They're simply enabling it to continue because where does it end? I mean, these are long-term fixes, but the problem is we have a street problem right now.
Yes.
I mean, I've had 7 incidences in 6 weeks with 2 break-ins.
Yep. You got a new store that's downtown.
It's 20 seconds from the RCP office.
But it's also, just down the street.
literally 20 seconds down the RCP office.
Yeah.
And it had broken in twice already in the first 6 weeks of being there.
Yeah.
But also, it's also my staff issue. I mean, money's money. And by the way, most businesses, for the people that think we all get covered on insurance, I've probably written off, $30,000 to $50,000 a year on stuff, on small break-ins, thefts that I never get to, and I've never done that.
Yeah.
And most businesses can, or as it is, our insurance rates are going up 30 and 40% a year.
Yeah.
So
massive because you've got the benefit of hindsight. Like I say, you've got decades of business experience in the same business, diversified and all that, but you've never had it at this level. It is going up like crazy, right?
Well, and what my staff have to deal with.
Yeah.
That's the biggest issue. I mean, it's hard enough getting retail staff. I've got some incredible staff that we've had for many years.
Long term. Yeah.
But you know what? They don't need to be wrestling down people stealing speakers or a guy threatening to punch my son in the head because we asked him to leave because he's yelling at one of our other staff members.
Yeah.
Those are things that staff shouldn't have to put up with and shouldn't be put into that position. And I think, you walk downtown, and I've walked downtown where you don't necessarily feel safe because, the guy's screaming or he's talking to himself. You don't know where his mind is.
Yep.
And I know from the RCMP that there's people that have criminal records that have carried knives. And so none of us want to deal with those things. But I guess my answer is what we're doing now is not working.
Right.
At the end of the day, I hear back from the RCP a lot lately. I better not get caught speeding or they're going to be looking for me. They're saying that it's beyond their control. Well, the problem is if it's beyond their control, then who is responsible for it?
Right.
I mean, the courts have basically turned a blind eye to unless somebody's getting murdered, which I even heard, listened to Colin the other day, they don't even know that very well. I think the courts, I mean, as much as I don't like American systems, but the courts not being elected don't necessarily have the same feeling of what's going on the street level. Right. And I get we can incarcerate people. I get that. But I think we need to have full treatment facilities. And I remember being on council, I'll never forget this comment is, we were talking about moving the gospel mission away from Leon Avenue.
Right.
And we were sitting there with people that I guess know the mental issues and the street people issue and say, well, we can't move them away from their environment.
Right.
Well, I would argue their environment is their problem. Right. Because if you're, trying to get clean and you go back on the street and every one of your friends is shooting up or doing things. So maybe the environment, maybe it needs to be away from the environment. And funny, I got a call from a gentleman just driving over here and he read, I guess, the article in the Cap News yesterday, and he phoned him. He goes, we need to build one of these facilities out in, way out in the middle of nowhere. And I said, well, that may not work. But I think his concept of being, having to build a facility away from the downtown core where we can treat them, and maybe there's a farm type setting. And, his answer to me this morning, just a few minutes ago, before I walked in this thing, was, bring animals in and have them get you close to animals and, do work the farm. And those are extreme ideas, but are they? Because what we're doing right now is not working. And I keep stressing, I'm 60 years old and I look at it and I go, East Hastings was bad when I was a kid.
So we're talking about Vancouver, the slums of Vancouver. Yeah,
it was bad when I was a kid.
Yep.
And we drive through Vancouver, we go, wow, look at that. Well, now we have that.
Yep.
And unfortunately, what's happening in East Vancouver hasn't got better. It's actually worse. There's 3 or 4 or 5,000 people on East Hastings now that are really, I'm not sure they're capable of necessarily looking after themselves in the state they're in today.
Yeah.
And I think
especially when they're, like you say, especially when they are constantly, it's surrounding them. Like I think of any issue that I've ever had in my life that I've tried to fix, whatever it is, where I have a weakness. And the advice that I give myself is not throw me into the situation that puts me right in the face of that weakness constantly. It's removal. It's getting away from it, right? And I mean, I think that's a basic thing that most people could agree with.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that, and I mean, it's going to take. I mean, if you add up, and I know I listened to Colin talk after my thing on Phil Johnson's show the other day, and
so you're talking about Colin. He's mentioned Colin a couple times. Colin Basran is the mayor of Kelowna. So
yeah, sorry, I forget. This is national.
All good. But international, 14 countries, my friend.
There you go. The hospital that we're spending so much money on medical, we need new money. Well, the problem is if you add up what the city is spending for cleaning up waste, what the fire department is spending, trying to revive people every day, what the ambulance services, what the hospitals are being put, add that money up and what's being done on just, and you're calling it a homeless issue, I'm calling it a street people issue.
Yeah, sure.
I think, we add that money up and we redirect some of that money and we actually re-look at what we're doing. And I guess it's not popular. I know it's not the direction that the NDP government's going or the Liberal government's going federally, but I just don't see not treating these people. And I think, I mean, I remember back in the day when I was, really a kid, even for me, it was a long time ago where the institutions were there and, maybe they weren't run the way they should have been.
Yeah.
But the world's changed. We're much more compassionate. We understand the mental illness issue way better than we did then.
Absolutely.
We understand, I think we have a better handle on drug issues and things like that. So I still think we can create an environment where we can treat people and help them with their mental issues. I always go back to my ex-father-in-law had Alzheimer's. In the last 2 or 3 years of his life, they put him in a facility that was locked doors. He couldn't leave. He couldn't, without getting permission.
Yep.
Because the argument behind that with somebody that's got Alzheimer's is they're not capable of making decisions that are for the good for themselves.
Absolutely.
Or anybody else.
And I don't think anybody, especially anybody who has had someone with Alzheimer's or dementia in their family, would disagree with what you're saying. It's 100% correct.
But how is that different than somebody that's really got mental ill problems that's on drugs or alcohol? They can't make decisions that are good for them. I mean, we had a gentleman standing in front of our store on Springfield Road right in the middle of the day, pull his pants down and take a big whatever it is, right on the middle of the day. That person obviously can't make decisions for himself at this particular point of his life. He needs some help.
Yes.
And he needs help. And it may need help for years. It may not be a 6-month program. He may have help for a long, long time.
Well, just like somebody with dementia, guess what? Or Alzheimer's, it don't get better. They need that for the rest of their days until their days are done.
And you know what?
Unfortunately, there are some people that is probably the case as well.
Unfortunately, some of the drugs, the opioids that are really bad, do a lot of fentanyl, does major damage to people's brains and things like that may never recover.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure I don't sound like I'm crass. I understand there are people that run across hard times that become homeless. We should absolutely figure out who they are and help them.
Well, that's where at the beginning where I was saying, okay, you got your criminals and then you got your drug addicted people and then you got mental illness and those aren't necessarily the same. But if you throw them all in one pot, guess what? They're going to cross pollinate.
Well, that's what's happened, right? I mean, you've got somebody that's got mentally ill. They tend to get on drugs really easily. Then they could get into prostitution. They could get into a lot of things. Yeah. So my answer is we got to start fixing these people.
Yes.
And I know that sounds so hard, but we may need to have a little tough love in some of these that say, they have to be analyzed and say, well, maybe we do need to institutionalize you to help you.
Yeah.
To have a good life as best as you've gone with whatever brain damage or whatever, either drugs or previous accidents have caused. And I don't like the direction we're going. And I don't think it's fixing the problem. And like I say, my big thing is for the rest of society, having everybody to, feel free to walk down Bernard Avenue, or for that matter, Leon Avenue, or, the Greenway or the Bikeway, it should be safe for all of us.
People should be able to be safe in the city that they live.
And I don't know what happened, what they did. I was just in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I was downtown Scottsdale. I was on their path network. I was rollerblading for 20 miles. I didn't see this cart homeless, mentally ill people laying in ditches anywhere there. Now, I don't know what they're doing. Yeah. And I'm not saying they're the right answer. I'm just saying I didn't see it.
Right.
And I wasn't just staying in the tourist areas. I was like, we were biking their canal, and we were doing all kinds of stuff, climbing their mountains, and just didn't see that. Where unfortunately, I don't like the fact that you can go almost anywhere in Kelowna and we're having these problems.
Yep.
And it's actually getting worse. And that to me is a little frustrating.
I feel the same way. I'm born and raised here. I love this city. I've said it myself. I've said, people are going to discover this place, and it's going to change. Growing up, I said that when I was in grade 6, taking trips across Canada and comparing where I was blessed enough to be born to these other cities. And it's like, oh my goodness. I've got friends who live in California, and they're talking about the idea. This has evolved so much. You go to Venice Beach right now. It is tent city in Venice Beach. That used to be, even 5 years ago, a tourist destination for decades previous. Now you go there and it's like, oh my God, it's a completely different place. You hear these things too about the police. If it's under $50 or under $100 or whatever, they don't even come for this kind of stuff anymore. I don't want to evolve into that. Clearly, you don't want to evolve into that.
I don't. And I feel bad for the RCMP. Don't get me wrong. The members are trying their best. But I honestly think, and this is where the head of the RCMP and I disagree, is I think we can make it a little more unwelcoming for some of these people that we know are street criminals. Right? I mean, there's only certain things in the law. And I know with what's going on with the Black Lives Matter and the police issue and people, I don't think we have that as bad in Canada. And I think, to me, is we need to maybe make it where we're not welcoming them. I mean, the last guy that stole something in our store, they have a picture of him. He's not allowed in Kamloops anymore. He's banned from Kamloops. So now he's in Kelowna stealing, and that's okay. And I guess for me, as a person that has a lot of pride in what we have here, I mean, one of the reasons we moved off of the corner of Bernard there is I used to get so frustrated. My staff would come in and they would be getting abused by these people that are clearly have mental and addiction issues. Yeah. But it's not fair for my staff to get that. But you look at, Kerry Park, which is the middle of our city. Yep. And I always send, Colin Bazarin and our city manager pictures on a Saturday at 11 o'clock. And there's 12 carts kind of circulated around in the middle of Kerry Park, which is the centerpiece of our city. Yep. That's not what we want to present to ourselves. Yep. I was funny because I was talking to an RCMP member, but why aren't we moving these guys on? And a couple of ladies walking by overheard me said, we don't even feel comfortable bringing our kids down here because of this. Yeah. So why aren't we doing something? Yeah. So I think we do have the ability with the RCMP to move people along, to disperse, to do those things. And hopefully the courts will understand that we can't just give a green light to these people that are street criminals on a regular basis. I mean, I don't know if you've been reading the paper, but, Springfield Road's had a rash of break-ins. Yep. Spall's had a rash of break-ins. Obviously, downtown does. Now you've got this corridor that if you go by the Elk Stadium there along the rail trail on that side of the road, it's tent city again. Yep. And are these people all truly homeless, or are they just mentally ill, drug addicted that don't have a place to go? And I think that's where we got to get. Well,
and I want to, I read in a personal development book once, this is my life motto, average people focus on the problem, the great ones focus on solution. And if you can get to a place where when a problem shows up, if you can just acknowledge, but then move over to that solution mode, you're moving forward in life. You talk about not being still water, right? You're moving forward, you're growing, you're evolving. You've got a very interesting perspective because from the entrepreneur, the successful entrepreneur to the successful leader, been around the block, you got life experience on a macro level, time and money, no object. What's the solution?
And that is the problem. First of all, I think, and I've talked to some very high up RCMP members about this. I think we have to get to a point federally with a law that says we do have the right to take somebody that's a criminal or mentally ill off the street and get mandatory treatment.
Okay.
I think right now the problem is somebody that you could put them in a treatment center, they can walk out tomorrow.
Okay, so they need the teeth to be able to do something when they in a situational instance where they can immediately have a route to solve something there, to solve that issue. Now, where do they go?
Well, that's the problem. And that's my issue.
That's the other problem.
We've spent hundreds of millions of dollars building homes, which I don't disagree that a certain amount of people need the homes.
Yep.
Now it's time to spend those hundreds of millions of dollars federally, provincially, and even play a role municipally. But we don't tax for that type of thing. Those really are provincial. I mean, as much as I don't always agree what the city of Kelowna does, at the end of the day, those are provincial and federal issues that need to be looked on in a bigger scope.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes the city gets a bit beat up on things because there's limited things they can do, and they've done their job. But I think we've got to lead by saying, there's all these long-term plans. We've got a problem now. And what's really disheartening to me is these are not the 50, the 60, the 40-year-old people that are run across hard times and that's why they're out there.
Right.
These are 20s, 30s, and they're truly in a real bad place. And to me is, how do we fix that? We don't have 10 years, 15 years to deal with that.
Yeah.
We got to deal with that today.
Yes.
And that's where I think that we've got to get some people standing up and saying enough is enough. What you're doing right now, and I'm sorry, doctors or healthcare people, or what you're doing is not working.
Right.
Understand that.
Right.
Let's redirect some money. And I think, the province and the federal government need to stand up and get moving on these facilities. And I mean, it's like anything else. You can do it well or you can do it bad. We can still do these type of facilities, these treatment facilities, with respect and dignity. But at the end of the day, we have to fix this problem. Because what we're doing, I had to close I had a store in Duncan.
Okay.
I got broken in 8 times in a 6-month window, all street people with a Catman bike behind me.
Right.
And I said to the mayor, I said, I can't do business in your town.
Right.
I need to close down because it's made it so impossible to do business. So, I mean, but it's also, think about the local people there.
Yeah.
Forget about business people. I think people go, oh, you business people look at things differently. But no, I look at the 80-year-old ladies that I was talking this morning at coffee going, you're right. We don't feel comfortable walking down our streets.
Yes.
That's just wrong.
Well, and the business owners, I mean, I got a soft spot for that because they're the ones that drive the economy. The local small business are what drives the economy. They're the ones that hire. They're the ones that, they contribute to the economy that way. And so I think that perspective is one that needs to be thrown out there. And if business owners and the people who work for them,
I was going to say, let's not forget the staff. Because they're the ones that end up taking most of the brunt, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, like I say, I have in my office where my office staff, which, both of them are ladies, walk in and there's a pile of human waste sitting at the front door of when they get in there at 8:30. It's like, come on, guys, like that's not okay.
That's right. And there needs to be consequence for that behavior. And right now there is none.
There's nothing.
It's running. I'll go back I always hear lore about, in the late the 70s and the early 80s, I was very young at that point. I was 5 years old in 1980. But that's when the lore is, that's when all the facilities were closed. Late 70s, early 80s, governments made decisions that they're going to close and they're going to let all these mentally ill people out on the street. I think it's safe to say 40 years later, that was not the right call. Hindsight is 2020. And right now, I think we're seeing the amplified results of that decision.
Well, and I think we're also seeing the amplified results of some really bad drugs on the street.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think, you could blame anybody you want, but I'm certain the medical industry got a lot of people hooked on opioids but fentanyl and all these things. And, if we want to really get down to nuts and bolts, why aren't we going after? I mean, I just saw a guy that was selling fentanyl, got 2 years, and then got probation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fentanyl is killing people.
Yeah.
If you shoot somebody in the head, you go to jail for 20 years.
Yeah.
But if you give them drugs and they die because you gave them that drugs, they get 2 years.
Yeah.
Let's get serious about this. I mean, I hate to compare some of the Asian countries like China and those countries, like zero tolerance.
Oh, remember when the Singapore cane? Remember when the guy spat gum on the street or whatever it was and he got caned and it was but guess what? There's no gum on the street ever there because the laws are so strict when it comes to that.
Well, and I look at when we're saying, we're passing a law, the provincial government just asked the feds to waive, drug people having drugs on them, with personal use. But who's selling those drugs to them?
That's where I think strong leadership sometimes when they say things like this is where the long form really fucking helps because, okay, you're not talking about drug users. You're talking about drug pushers. You're talking about people who, and I think that there are so many times that the misconception is that they're lumped into one group. That's not what you're talking about. You're talking about people who produce, sell this fentanyl, put it onto people. They should be liable.
Yeah. And also I look at it, I go, the police and the medical system are not saying stop selling it, because the problem is they know if there's 100,000 people on fentanyl and you stop on opioids, if you stop giving them drugs,
right,
they're going to die, or it's not going to be good. They need treatment.
Those people need treatment.
So I guess in one way they're turning a blind eye to saying, well, the drugs are coming in.
Yep.
Because we know they need them.
Yep.
But it all stems back that they're not getting treated. Because you keep having a system where you've got to keep the illegal drugs feeding these people on the street.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they will go through major problems.
Absolutely.
You can't just cut somebody off.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the RCB go, well, we're catching the drug dealers, but do they really want to catch the drug dealers? Because you still need these people to have drugs. And to me, what we really need is to get serious about treatment.
Yeah.
And that, I can't stress enough on that. And it's outside the box. It's not just give them the free drugs. It's like, if you had a sick animal, you wouldn't just put them in a pen and let them just do that. You would try to fix them.
Yeah.
And to me, that's where the emphasis has not been done.
Yeah.
And I, it's very frustrating because we all, as everybody else, feels the repercussions of what's happening. I don't want to see people lose their kids. I know 2 or 3 or 4 people that lost their kids to fentanyl overdose. That's not okay.
No, it's not.
But we're not doing anything to treat people.
No, and we've had some folks on the broadcast from an organization called Mom Stop the Harm, and they talk about this, and they have ideas and solution when it comes to treating people. And I think it's getting civic leaders, it's getting entrepreneurs, it's getting the people who can make decisions, it's getting the people who have solutions all together and finding. It's not just one. Obviously, it's not a one solution issue. This is something where there's going to be a whole bunch of moving parts that have to be put together like gears that need to work together to make something like this happen.
But that goes back to, unfortunately, there aren't a lot of people that are willing to put their lives, their names, their everything on a provincial ballot or a federal ballot to make some of these rash changes that, and they will be criticized.
Absolutely.
If you're going to try to make this change, you're going to be criticized.
Absolutely.
And how many people are willing to do that today? I mean, I did it for 21 years back when it was probably not as big an issue when it come to Facebook. I mean, you guys used to get beat up on the editorial and all these
letters
forums.
To the editor.
Letters
always,
to the
your
editors
name was in there a lot.
A lot, yeah. And you can, for a long time, I stopped getting the newspaper for years. When I was on city council, I just didn't read it, and you have to stop getting because you just want to. It gets hard after a while reading how bad you are. But at the end of the day, it's part of what you have to do. And I guess that's my fear is I don't think we're having enough. And don't get me wrong, the people that are running are doing a great job. I have no issue with that.
Yeah.
But if you're going to take this thing outside the box, which I think is where it needs to be, there will be criticized.
Yeah.
And
so there's got to be a safe place for leadership to be able to even delve with this. It can't be a third rail. You make it a third rail, no one's going to touch it, right?
Yeah.
Do you miss it?
I miss fixing the problems. I've never was one, when for me it was like, I didn't go to a lot of it. I had 3 boys. I was busy with their hockey and taking them to whatever. I didn't go to a lot of public events. I don't miss the public shaking hands and stuff like that. Not that I didn't like it, but that was never why I was there.
Yep.
I was there every Monday morning to sit down and say, how do we make Kelowna a better place?
Yeah.
So I missed that. And, Kelowna's fortunate when it comes to, and I always also get a little sensitive when you start insulting Kelowna staff because we're very lucky. Kelowna's got a very strong team of leaderships within the staff.
Yep.
And Kelowna should be very proud of that. And all homegrown, or most of it homegrown. And I think that's something we put in place back in the day. And I think from a city staff perspective, I don't always agree with them. They like they like to spend our money a little too much for what I like. I like to see them be a little more controlling on taxes. And I think we don't always have to build the platinum thing. We could probably build the gold once in a while.
Yeah.
And I used to battle with them all the time, but battle with them in a very respectful way to say, hey, listen, this is what you guys think, but we're elected to think this way.
Yes.
And I miss that. I miss that ability to sit down in a necessarily in a back room and looking at, okay, this road standard and go, well, do we need to be there?
Yeah.
Because everything you do when it comes to increasing the standards increases the cost.
Absolutely.
And then we go back and say, well, cost of housing is too high. Well, we're kind of helping that by having massive DCC increases. Yep. And we're already going through, changes in green design and buildings. And so we keep talking about the price of housing, but the city's not helping because
by
we're
keeping that standard at
so high. And don't get me wrong, I
Yeah.
want Kelowna to be a good standard, but it doesn't always have to be the champagne standard.
Again,
and
lots
I
of-
miss that. I miss that debates back and forth with the staff and fixing the problems and, you know, getting across things and getting involved. I miss that.
Would you ever run again for anything?
I don't know. I mean, I've over the years, I always said I should run provincially or federally, and I'm going like, you know what, problem is my business is got so big, and my 2 boys are involved, and
Yeah.
third is kind of in the background, he's in real estate, and so, you know, would I get involved? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's something I've thought about, but it is a commitment. I mean, that's the thing, and then you're going back. That commitment is how much do you want to take personally with what happens in the social media world.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think there's a lot of people, I think there's always that small, I always looked at it. I mean, if I got support of the bulk of the people, I did my job. And my job when I was running for council or anything else is I represent the people that I believe what their views are. I've never been afraid to share those views.
Yep.
But again, sometimes if you're going to make change, you're going to get criticized.
I feel you.
And I think, you know, it's not easy. And I hope people that are like yourself and even young people that want to get involved in it, but get involved. And that's why I think I've never been a big fan of full-time city councilors.
Right.
Because then you get the career politician
Yep.
that will sit on a fence and never do anything
Yep.
because they never want to get criticized.
Yeah.
When you get somebody as a part-time job, they're there, they see the problem, and you get a way bigger cross-section of who can run then.
Right.
You know, you don't want just the business guy that's semi-retired to run.
Right.
You don't want just the retiree to run. And not saying that they're bad.
No.
But you want to get a cross-section.
You want an
wanna get-
accurate representation of the people that make up that community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that to me has always been a passion. I've always fought to keep city council wages down, not up. Because I want to make sure that people aren't going into that job because that's the best job they're going to get.
Right.
That, you know, that shouldn't be your best job. That should
man.
be, you know, so those, I'm
It's a
passionate
job
about-
of contribution. Not,
It is.
Not, yeah.
And then I
love
want
that.
as big a cross section of population to be able to do that job.
I gotcha.
And for me, it's that I'm super passionate about it. And you know, I love our city and I love the fact that, you know, I mean, as much as we talk about the street people and the problem, we still live in a phenomenal city. And
Absolutely.
It's amazing. And there's some exciting things always happening. The university's growing, the airport. I'm still on the airport committee and it's been 20 years with that. And, you know, that's been a major driver of our economy
yeah.
and things we do. And so, you know, I'm still really bullish on Kelowna and what we're doing. I just get frustrated when I see our streets kind of going to hell, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, time gets slippery when we start doing this. You know, we usually try and go for 45. We're over that now. So we're gonna move to the close here. He Changed It is it's a movement that my wife and her team are building, and it's a place that men can go. And talk about this stuff, work on their mental wellness when it comes to things, to vent, to get things out. And it's very cool talking and hearing the stories. What was it like hearing Kyle tell his story on here? And what do you think about what He Changed It's doing here?
No, I think he did a great job on that piece. And I think you did a great job bringing forward things. I also think that I think, you know, when we talk about mental toughness, I think we're lacking a little bit of that today. You know, I think we're too easy. You know, I always look at something, a glass half full,
Yep.
not half empty. And I think sometimes we get wrapped up in you know, it's
The minutia.
It's too hard, or
Yep.
we're going to walk away from it. What I see a little bit, and I'm not going to say generational, but I see a little bit where it's just too easy. Things aren't going my way. I'm leaving. I'm walking. I'm not coming in today. Sometimes you got to fight through stuff. And I know that doesn't necessarily fit into the mental wellness thing, but sometimes you got to look at a positive outlook at things. You've got to find ways to find what you say, better people to be around, or you can control your life.
Absolutely.
And to me, you know, we've all had things that aren't so much fun happen to us.
Yep.
And, you know, some are certainly much worse than what I've had possibly, but our life was never, we were dead ass poor when we grew up. I mean, my dad, you know, we got spanked and we didn't have the perfect upbringing. But it was but I'll be honest with you, it was a great upbringing.
Sure, absolutely. But you know what? You talk about, I wouldn't wish on any parent what you went through with Kyle.
No, that was horrible.
I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
No, that was terrible.
While you were a business owner, while you were a politician, this stuff happens. That's what He Changed It's all about. It's guys who have been through stuff are open to talking about having gone through that stuff to guys who are going through stuff.
Well, and it's interesting because part of that problem is you go through these things, and I say to people like, you know, one of my store managers or somebody else, I go, they're panicking and they're like, Christ, you can feel the pressure in their voice.
Yeah.
And my comment line is anybody dying here?
Yep.
Right?
I know, man. My wife and I are about to release a book. We went through it with our granddaughter. 5 months. We were in BC Children's Hospital with her. We 18-month granddaughter, tumor the size of my fist behind her tailbone. And even since we've come back, you know, my wife's a tech founder. We're doing it off the side of our desk. You know, I got a financial business and we're doing this off the side of our desk. And the pressure gets extreme. It gets extreme. And we look at each other and we say, hey, do we have a baby with cancer? No, because she's better.
Yeah.
And you have that perspective where you can say, is anybody dying here? And you can say it with that emotion and it almost rips out of you because you've been there and you've seen that. And the perspective that comes with that gives you perspective for the other times in life that you would have considered hard that now.
Well, and I think that's what I was trying to get to the point before I got a little emotional there was.
No, man.
Take what you've got as a crisis.
Yep.
Swallow it.
Yep.
Deal with it. Find a solution.
Absolutely.
Don't walk away from it. And to me, I find there's too many people, today's world, if their life isn't going exactly like they want, they either quit their job or they walk away or whatever it is. Sometimes you got to fight.
Yep.
And you got to fight through it.
Yep.
And that's tough because it's not easy.
But you don't have to do it alone. And I think that's the point where he changed it is filling a massive, massive vacuum that is out there. Is there are so many people that think they have to do it alone. And they don't. They can collaborate. Who can you collaborate with? You can collaborate with counselors. You can collaborate with coaches. You can collaborate with other business owners. You can collaborate with people, everyday people who've been through it and find that solution. And I think that that's the key. And it's like, we're going to finish the way that we started. It's finding ways that we can all work together.
Absolutely.
To make this happen.
Yeah. But I do think we got to stand up and do a little bit of responsibility on ourselves.
Definitely.
I think,
100%.
You know, I had this upbringing was bad or this happened back in the day. Sometimes you got to go past that.
Absolutely. Well, one of my favorite personal development books in the world, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. You know, not everything is my fault, but guess what? Everything's my responsibility.
Exactly.
You know, somebody breaks into my store, somebody, whatever. It's my responsibility how I deal with that.
Exactly.
And what he changed it is this place where guys can help deal with things finding solutions so they can deal with things and stand up and take responsibility, like exactly what you're talking about.
It's not about a crisis. We'll all have crises.
Yes.
It's how you deal with those crises when they happen.
Bang on.
And that's the key, I think, to success as well in business. I mean, it's not always easy, personal life or business life, but when a crisis hits you, how do you fix it? Absolutely. We went through that with the pandemic.
Yes.
I mean, big crisis. I mean, all of us were pretty shaken by this, and it's still not over yet.
Yep.
I just was on a conference call this morning with my staff saying, hey, guys, let's not forget, we still are going through this pandemic. We got to do all these things. And those things are always going to happen, whether it's the pandemic or there's always mini crises in your life.
Yes.
But it's how you deal with that crisis that sets you apart from somebody else.
Absolutely. And we're talking about this with the homeless. That exact principle can be applied to how we deal with the situation. We got to figure out how we're going to deal with this properly. We got to take responsibility for where it's at. We can't just put Band-Aids on this shit. We have to absolutely stand up and take responsibility for where things are at.
Can't be afraid to make a drastic change. Because I go back to what I told the RCP. I get you guys have your hands tied, but what we're doing isn't working.
Absolutely.
So somewhere there has to be change.
I could do this with you all day.
Sorry. I know.
No. Are you kidding me? There is nothing to be sorry about. Again, I respect where you are coming from. I respect what you have done. I appreciate very much you taking time out of your day to be part of this. The only reason why I'm stopping the discussion now is out of respect for time for everybody here, including the listeners. Thank you very, very much. And as he changed it grows, like my wife and her team, they got big aspirations for this thing. As it grows, please, at some point, I would love to have you back here and talk more about this stuff. Again, you and I could have had 5 different podcasts about 5 different subjects and taken up all that time very, very easily. I just appreciate you very much. I appreciate you for putting it on the line the way that you have, for living loud, even though you are a regular guy that goes through regular things that everyone else does, crisis, that sort of thing. You've also been not afraid to be bigger. So thank you for that, Andre.
Well, and thank you for your podcast. I think it does bring, people need to hear that other people go through struggles as well.
Yeah.
And there's solutions. And I think hopefully you and your wife's podcast really takes off because those are key because people need to hear that there are solutions to their problems.
Yeah.
And I think your podcast can lay that out for them.
Oh man. Well, and you know what? We're just the tip of the spear. The app itself with all of the things, in a couple weeks here, the course that was built with Canadian Mental Health, on communication, effective communication, that's about to go into the app. There's a whole bunch of really cool things that are happening. And, we're just really grateful for the early adopters. We've done nothing to market this thing so far yet. Guess what? Every day we have new members in the He Changed It community. Every single day that's happening. We're watching this growth, and man, you ain't seen nothing yet. Thank you very much for giving us your attention today on this episode of heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. My name is Mike Chisholm. Go change something.